Three, two, one. India, welcome back to the December 26th podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you
Thanks for
doing?
coming back. I'm good. We were just saying offline how you came with this razzle dazzle style happening right now with your accessories and your shirt. And I just threw on a cotton crew neck t-shirt for this because it's Saturday, but we're going to make it rock. We're just going to let it rock.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Well, I'm happy to be back. Thank you. This is I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Likewise. So as we've been doing these, I've been going back just to verify when people were on. And it's so funny because I think in my mind, not as much time has passed as it really has in actuality.
Right.
So you were episode 38.
Wow.
And now, we will hit our 200th episode before the year is over. So
congratulations.
Thank you. So that's nuts, right? I also know you've been through a lot of change, some career iteration through then. So before we get into specifically what your life has looked like in the past year, tell me how your life has changed since you appeared on the show way back in 2018.
That's so crazy. 2018. Wow. And it's 2021 now? That's right.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So yeah, when we first had our conversation, we were in New York in person. Great dialogue, great conversation. I really shared so much that was honestly very therapeutic, not only for myself. I think sometimes we never realize what we've conquered or the triumphs that we've had until we kind of start to unpack them in real time. And I would definitely say that our conversation was very therapeutic, just for me personally. So since 2018, I've split my time between New York and Los Angeles. I first came out here to work with an agency, doing some really, really cool things, being able to be a bit more innovative, and a lot of different challenges. So my traditional trade background was really kind of like entertainment marketing. And I had always told myself that I really wanted to craft myself as like this true marketing maven where I could do everything from not only traditional advertising and marketing, entertainment marketing, digital, social, even experiential, being able to activate in that way. But the one area that kind of really blankets across all of the field and industry is public relations. And I had never, integrated marketing wise, you touch public relations, but I wanted to really have a comprehensive knowledge of PR. And so I got an opportunity to come out to Los Angeles and work with an agency where I was supporting the brand Old Spice and even being able to touch Secret a bit. And that was incredible. So, but during that time, I started to really recognize that I wanted to live my life a bit more intentionally. We have all these goals, we have all these things that we're doing. And I think a balance for me was that I knew that turning 34 this year, I would be officially older than my father was when he died. And so that hit different. And I was like, you know what? Let's just go. Like, let's do it. So put a plan in place, thought through it, and went ahead and resigned from corporate America indefinitely. And what I will say is that in 2019, when I left Cornerstone Fader and I came to this new agency, I actually deleted my LinkedIn page. I deleted it. And I said to myself, and I feel like my spirit was talking to me, and I was just like, I'm not going to create another LinkedIn page until the company that I put on there is a company that I run or own. Right. And so I find that to be really phenomenal, being in 2021 and kind of really keeping that promise to myself, being intentional, even not even thinking through how things transpired for me to get to the place where it was like, all right, I'm going to go ahead and like leave this role. But it happened. And I think I always talk about like manifesting and being intentional, but that is definitely a testament to that. And I can get into a whole testimony about the things that I've done and like how the Holy Spirit has talked to me, and like just even praying and talking to God and being like, all right, so what do you think about this? And he'd be like, I know, I already told you what it was. So, but yeah, so since 2018, I've transitioned. I am CMO of Malcolm Inc., which NFL star Malcolm Jenkins holding company, where we have several verticals within the span of retail, franchising, media, philanthropic efforts, venture capital fund. And we're actually going to be doing some other extensions to some other verticals that I'm really excited that we'll announce next year. But CMO of the holding company, president of the production company, which is the media entity within Malcolm Inc. And then I also officially started a consulting and talent management arm called Fixate.
So that's a lot, for sure. I mean, it's classic and traditional for a 26er to wear that many hats, but to, the average American, it's like, okay, how is all this happening? But we know even when moving in intention and knowing that God called you to something, there are some very real life considerations that happen, and we're human. And even when we know in our knowing, in our gut, that this is what I'm supposed to be doing, sometimes there is still fear, concern, or worry. So moving out of corporate America in the traditional sense and taking the leap into the roles that you're in now, did you feel fear? Did you say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, but let me have a backup plan or a contingency just in case? What was that thought and emotional process like for you?
So I think that definitely felt fear because, I did a budget and I knew what my expenses were. I know what comes in and what comes out and what goes out. And so in 2019, I bought a house in Brooklyn. And then in that same year, I moved to Los Angeles. And so, and where I'm paying rent and then I'm paying a mortgage. And so for me, I'm thinking about, in a place being financially responsible. And in 2020 being such a tumultuous year because of the pandemic for a lot of individuals, I was blessed to have tenants that paid their rent. You know what I mean? I have a lot of women. There's a group that I'm in called Black Women Homeowners of Brooklyn. And it's tons of us in there. And a lot of them were not as fortunate to be able to have tenants that continue to pay their rent. So I'm always just thinking about, okay, what goes out, what comes in. I bought myself a car at the top of 2020 as a birthday present to myself. That's due every month. So, I'm always thinking about the risk. And my great uncle always says to me, he's like, you have to understand your risk tolerance, right? And I am a bit more risk averse just because I know what the dark side looks like of being, because growing up and having different experiences is like, yeah, I don't want to be homeless, or I don't want to be house poor, or I don't want to be on the other side of that. So for me, my biggest fear wasn't even about failure. It was about failure in the sense of not being successful in my role, which I think naturally, gravitates and connects to this idea of being, fiscally responsible. But it was just like, am I going to be able to pay my bills? Am I going to be able to bring in enough clients with my own consulting and talent agency to be able to do the things that I want to do? And that is really what shook me up some, but didn't make me stutter step in the sense that I wasn't committed to doing it. So, I made a plan, worked with certain individuals to kind of like think through like just the way that I could be fiscally sound in my finances to make sure that I could do everything that I wanted to do. And even had a conversation with my business partners of being like, hey, what do you all think about this? And, we were able to lock a lot of things in. And so I think for me, I am very much aware of the saying that, to your point about like, what were those things? It was, I think you are going to be, fear is man-made. Like, it's not from God. Like, it's not something that exists. And so you've got to figure out how you starve fear and feed faith, right? So, and that's something that I repeat over and over again. So how do I starve the fear and feed faith? And I continue to do that and continue to really manifest the things that I wanted. So I would write things out at the top of the year. In 2020, I wrote stuff out. At the top of 2021, I wrote things out. And it is incredible to see how those things are unraveling and unpacking, because I'm really a big component of speaking life into the things that I want and not breathing life into the things that don't serve me.
That's a word. So thinking about Malcolm specifically, right? Mm-hmm. Like Malcolm's not the first talent you've worked with, not the first celebrity. Mm-hmm. What was it about him specifically that made you say, this is a brand that I want to jump in with both feet on and attach myself at the executive level?
Right. So Malcolm, I actually put Malcolm in his first commercial back in 2010. And, he saved my life because I just started working at an ad agency and we had a last minute need. And through a friend connection, we were able to get him in. And being able to work with his foundation and help when he did his first summer camp in Jersey, and just really fostered an organic and authentic relationship, challenging one another. We think very differently about a lot of things. And I always love that. I love individuals who are not yes men per se, right? Where everyone just says everything's agreeable and we're all like-minded. I'm okay with not being like-minded with a highly intelligent person. And so over the years, we've been able to work together. I got him into a Marriott deal. He did some work with Old Spice as well, just because he has an incredible brand. He's an incredible purpose. He's very, very much about excelling the lives or even balancing the lives of Black and brown individuals so that the scales are at least somewhat equal, right? And so creating that equality, and I love the mission, I love the purpose behind that and intentionality behind that. And so for me, one of the soundest pieces of advice I've ever received was from Bismarck's manager. His name was Monty. He's no longer with us, but he said to me, he's like, when you decide to work with talent, you'll recognize that you're working with the right talent when it doesn't feel like work, where you're not looking at the clock and being like, is it time to go yet? You're not feeling like, everything's a trial and tribulation. You don't want it more than they do. And so working with Malcolm, I can say that he's an incredible athlete. He's an incredible father. He's all these things that are incredible, but he is an incredible businessman. And the way that he thinks, the way he challenges his, his team and his executive team has only made me better. And so when given the opportunity to do this, it was a no-brainer because I know that he is going to get it done, not only just because of his passion and his commitment and his leadership. I mean, the man's been a captain, a majority of his NFL career. So everyone sees that leadership in him. And so to have him at the helm and even him entrusting me to be the president of his production company is phenomenal. So for me, it was just a blessing, and it was a no-brainer.
So we know standing up a company, even when there aren't these unusual circumstances happening in the world, is difficult, right? Getting things going, finding your rhythm, brand development, brand expansion, selecting projects, getting them into development. It's a lot of different components. Now, when you add quarantine to that and how that really changed the landscape of production across the globe, right? But let's focus on the US. Shows still haven't come back that were supposed to be scheduled to happen. So how did the pandemic really adjust what your goals were with respect to the production company specifically?
So I think, we're really diving into it in 2021. I think, having the initial conversations with Malcolm this year around the production company, setting goals. It's like, what do you want to accomplish? What are the things? And we established those. So I know what my KPIs are for this year. And I think because 2020 was so challenging, there were a lot of people that were inside. We're looking for writers, we're looking for content creators, we're looking for individuals who have stories to tell, and being able to pair that up with the overall mission that Malcolm has about really showcasing that Black and brown individuals are not a monolith, and that we're not just all celebrities, we're not just all actors, we're not all just athletes. We're coders, telling a story about a coder, or telling a story about, a lawyer who, has XYZ, like just different things that people don't necessarily imagine or picture that the Black story could be told in that way. Like, we want to tell those stories. Like, we want to tell the awkward individual. We want to tell the insecure individual. We want to tell the confident, but the false sense of confidence. We want to talk about the people who have different traumas. And so we know that people were inside in 2020 writing. And what we will take advantage of in 2021 is finding those storytellers and putting them on screen. And so I think from our seat, because we're such a baby in this industry, we're just hungry. People get comfortable when they get to the top, you know what I mean? And so we utilize that as even more motivation for us to continue to grind and keep going, not only with kind of like excellence at the helm, but also being very, very secure in the fact that we don't need to be the smartest person in the room. So that's why, we've locked in representation from a talent agency, entertainment lawyer, publicists within the industry, so that we can lean on them and their expertise, their relationships, and then take all of that and kind of garner the content that we want so that we can put it to screen.
So you mentioned, being the little guy in the game. We've seen the headlines of names that we recognize, Black names, inking these deals, like these overall deals with Warner and Netflix that are like worth 8-9 figure, just
Crazy.
ridiculous amount of money, right?
Yeah.
Are you optimistic that those who are in the forefront right now in terms of visibility, Black and brown faces to present content, are forwarding the same mission of putting forth groundbreaking productions, also presenting us in different lights? Are you confident that that's happening with those who maybe were more recognizable in the space, let alone what you guys are working on for a moment?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we hear it in conversations that we have. Like we're hearing like, oh, Regina King is doing this, or LeBron is doing this, Steph Curry is doing this, Chris Paul is doing this. And so Patrice, we see what these people, we hear when we're in the room, Matthew Cherry's doing this. And so it's interesting. We'll have conversations where we're like, oh, we have an animated piece we want to get out. And they're like, oh, this is very timely. This is something that needs to be told. We want to make, Black girls feel confident in this kind of way. And then they'll be like, we had a similar such and such from so-and-so. And so they're happening. People know the need. And, we're not in a place where we're going to not do what we want to do or what we feel very, very passionate about because so-and-so is doing something similar. We can tell stories in a different way, in a different voice to get it done, because the more representation that we see on screen, the better we are going to increase the confidence of these young ones. Because, people talk about representation matters, but it is there. I still think about the fact that I never had a Black teacher until I got to college. You know what I'm saying? And so, and think about the statistics about graduation rates and things like that. It's like, if you just see somebody that's doing something that you want, and they're not just an athlete or a singer or performer, but they're a person that codes, or they're a person that's doing something else that's not in the tech world. And you're like, oh, I'm capable of these things. Like, we got to put that stuff on screen. We got to showcase that. There's other ways to be successful in life rather than just, playing on a field or playing on the screen. So, yeah.
Absolutely. And I think too, you really answered my next question, which is these folks who are in the forefront right now. There's been a belief in the past that I think that like Hollywood and entertainment and content creators, there can only be one Black company at a time, right? There's not space for all of us to rise. It's like you have that person that's having a moment and everybody else has to wait. And that happens, I think, sometimes even in the talent perspective. It's the one comedian that's everywhere. It's the one, so, but I think we are shifting in a way as a community and as a country where there is space. There's space for many different perspectives, many different creative outlets, many different creative styles, many different creators to really thrive. Do you think that that's more driven by we just have so many mediums now and it's easier to get directly to the audience? Or do you think the industry does have an appetite for a wide array of Black talent and Black creators and Black companies kind of coming forth to the forefront?
I think it's a mixture of a few things. I think it's the demand. I think that what we just saw that happened in the Oscars, before Oscars So White, I don't know if it would have happened. Right. I think that it's demanding it. It's shining a light on the inequality, the lack of balance and representation, the things that happen, to be like, this is not okay. This is not a balanced reflection of what the United States looks like across the board. The new census release, and we see where we are in our numbers. So why is that not reflected in the content, in the toys that we see? Like, there's all of these things. And so I think the demand is what's not only motivating people to rise up and be like, I have a story to tell. I'm here. This is what I want. This is what I deserve. And we're equally as talented. Like, for people to think that, Black folks can't tell their own stories, or that we don't know how to do this, that, and the other, it's just a lie. It's a myth. And, we got to stop subscribing to those false narratives. And so I think that is, on one hand, one of the recognitions, and Black and brown folks are stepping into their power, right? And then recognizing their worth and value and demanding as such from the powers that be until we become the powers that be, right? And then I think in that vein of only a few of us can make it, is just us. We need to unsubscribe to the narrative that's the truth. You know what I mean? We are no longer going to be slaves to those things that held us back. Like, we can all win, and we should. And I want to be an individual that I was an individual. I am where I am today because Black women reached back and pulled me up, right? I am who I am because I was mentored and advised by incredible Black women throughout my career who I could lean on and call and see and talk and be reflective and reflect to about the things that I wanted, the things that I was scared of, all of those things, those safe spaces, creating that vulnerability. And so I will be an individual, but I see that in the industry too, where, you know, women are, you know, Regina Hall just got a first look deal and she just found that she's, you know, she's securing an executive. Her team is this and that. And, you know, women are doing that. Men are doing that. And I think the teams recognize that there's enough money for us to all eat. And as it should, because, you know, Black folks not only run the culture, have the most entertaining experiences to showcase within that. Right. But, you know, we should be the ones leading that. It doesn't make any sense for a white executive to be telling my story. And so the more and more that we recognize that we should be in those rooms and we're paying it forward and pulling up another Black or brown individual to do that, the more we will continue to win. But, you know, I am seeing Black and brown leadership across the board who are coming into this production world or media world who are unsubscribing to that narrative that only one of us can make it.
And I think that's an important point, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think for a while that was so internalized by so many people that it would inhibit people from pulling someone else up. It's like, well, if I try to help you get a seat at the table, I might lose mine, right? And I don't think, not all, but I don't think most people consciously feel like they wouldn't verbalize that. Now there's some just dirty folks who would. They wouldn't verbalize it, but because of what we've witnessed, and what we've experienced too, that has been internalized so deeply that for a while there, you know, you couldn't get, sometimes you can even have a discovery call with people just to get information. It was just this fear that like, by giving, I'm somehow depriving. And I've said it before on this show, like I believe in the law of universal supply, like there's enough for all of us to get it. Right. The world is a big place. Opportunities are vast. And if you walk into it and you feed in with that belief, things will manifest. I wholeheartedly believe that.
Yeah. And I am with you. I mean, if that is one thing that I wholeheartedly, it is the manifestation that exists. So yes. And I think that, like you said, people are seeing that, but there are individuals that are still believing those archaic notions. And honestly, I wish them the best because those are not the ones that are going to stay at the top as the rest of us continue to pay it forward and push forward.
Mm-hmm. So I've been having this conversation often with my own therapist, with friends who are therapists. And we've been talking about life changes, a lot about that, and making career moves, relocation, all of those things are a life change, whether it affects you on the surface in a negative way or a positive way, it's an adjustment. And that adjustment can cause overwhelm. It can cause exhaustion, a lot of different things that, you know, ways in which it can affect you. Now, when you add the current political climate to that, the current healthcare landscape, the fact that we're just living in the strangest time of our generation, it really elevates the stressors that come in areas that you normally would be able to manage, right? Most of us, particularly as Black folks who are professionals, deal with stressors that have nothing to do with our jobs, stressors in the jobs, all of these things. It seems like you have really been one of those people who've thrived this entire time, right? So, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like, that's my question though. How have you maintained peace of mind, calmness in your spirit in the midst of all these adjustments with the 24-hour news cycle that's not positive? There are many things that have happened. How have you managed to remain at peace, but also productive?
Oh, that is so loaded. Goodness gracious.
It is. This is what we do here at the show.
I love it. But it's a good loaded because I think that I operated 2020 in seasons and, you know, in my own seasons, not the way that the world tells me it's spring, autumn, whatever. So, you know, at the top of 2020, I'm transitioning to Los Angeles. So I'm splitting my time between the two, getting just adjusted to the new life in LA. I usually go on a trip for my birthday. So when I came back from my birthday trip, we were in lockdown, right? And so I hadn't really spent a lot of time in Los Angeles before So a few things, and I think I said this to you on the first time that we talked. I recognized in 2018 that I am going to be my best self. Actually, 2019, I am going to be my best self if I take at least 4 vacations a year. Like, I need seasonal vacations. Like, I know, because I'm working 80 to 100 hours. I'm working all the time. And so, and I'm okay with working all the time because I know what the end goal is, and I know that I love what I do. But I know that in order for me just to be my best, the best version of myself, I need to be able to hear the ocean.
Amen.
So
Amen.
I can send an email, but if I'm sending an email next to the ocean in the Maldives, it feels a bit different. You know what I'm saying? So, come back from my birthday trip with my sister, who I usually travel with. That's my travel partner. That's my best friend. Love her to death. And when I come back, and I had just gotten confirmation that I had gotten my car, and I said to myself, because we were in lockdown, I said, you know what? The car that I wanted, and this is about manifestation. I had told myself that when I moved to LA, I was like, I have to get a car, because I had done the Uber thing for a while. And I was like, that's just not my narrative. I cannot do this every day back and forth to work. So I was like, I'm going to get a car. And I was like, and I want a car that I want. Like, I want something that makes sense. And I recognize that I am very much more organized than type A. When I find myself breaking things down, it's the same thing when I bought my house. But I was like, what kind of car do you want? And I was like, well, you know what? Let me just do it. And I thought I wanted like an Audi, and then I thought I wanted a Mercedes, and I thought I wanted, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to get a Tesla. I want a Tesla. But one of my friends who grew up in wealth, and just one of the best pieces of advice she ever gave me, she was like, one thing that the rich know, that he's like, the wealthy know versus the rich, because she's like, wealthy is an investment of time, but there are people who are just rich and they're like new money, like that kind of thing. She's like, the wealthy knows that you never buy a new car. You always buy a luxury car, used, good mileage, whatever. So I remember being like, all right, cool, I'm going to buy a used Tesla, because it's a car that's an EV car. And I don't know that, we used to gas. We don't know about that. I was like, let me go to the Tesla. Tesla has a used inventory online. And like, they give you extra warranty and all this stuff. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was like, but I knew I wanted it to look like this. I wanted it to look a certain way, whatever. So I manifested it. And I kid you not, like right before I leave on my birthday trip, the car pops up for the one that I want. I order it. It's available in Orlando. I could ship it to California. But when I come back, I'm like, I'm going to just drive across country. It's my 33rd birthday. I've never done a cross-country trip by myself. And what better way to do it than in my car that I just bought myself? So let's do this. And I utilize that as a very therapeutic drive, like just myself, like listening, understanding like, wow, you're doing this. And so that was a big kickoff to the pandemic for me. So being in the pandemic, I'm already coming in a bit differently because of just the thing that I did for myself. And then I will say that I probably had like 1 or 2 dark days, like in April. And then after that, that was it. Right. And so I will say that I had the wherewithal and the power to kind of just be like, okay, get yourself out of this. Like, you got to shake it off. You got to kind of get this together. Cause I hadn't been working out either. And that's a therapeutic notion for me. And so I got on my Peloton. I started getting on my Peloton at the end of April, and kind of was just committed to like making sure that I made time for myself to work out. I made time for myself to meditate, and I made time for myself to start to cook, because I find cooking to be very therapeutic as well. I just love, and we have a great kitchen in our spot here in California. So I'm like, I love this. So this is great. And then all throughout that time, when I got to August, I think talking about the health piece, I recognized that, and this is kind of like a thing that I don't know if you guys have talked about this before in December 26th, but like as a Black woman, and being in my 30s, we are prone for so many health disparities. I have a friend that found out in the middle of last year that she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it just makes you start to reevaluate your health. So I went to the doctor when I went back to visit New York, and I found out that I had fibroids again. I had fibroids in 2018, but I had fibroids again. I like my heart, I have a arrhythmia in my heart. So I needed to go see a cardiologist, just like crazy things that you're just like, I'm only 33. Like, what are we doing? So, when the doctor was like, and then I am predisposed for high blood pressure, but I don't know if you know this, but like a lot of times fibroids and high blood pressure are intrinsically linked as well. Mm-hmm. So, and a lot of people don't know about that. Like, typically if you have fibroids, there's like a percentage of women that will also have high blood pressure in conjunction with that, even though we don't know what's causing the fibroids. It could be the things that we're eating. It could be our stressors. It could be a ton of things. And so whether or not I could showcase that I'm not stressed on the outside, my body is telling me that there's something stressing me, right? In my mind. And so the doctor was like, I'm going to put you on, they wanted to put me on high blood pressure meds. And that's really what changed my mind, my mentality. Cause I was like, my dad was on high blood pressure medication. And actually, and I don't know if that's what caused him to have kidney failure, but I was just triggered. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to start to eat differently, and I'm going to do things my own way. And I told my doctor, I said, when I come back to see you in November, if my blood pressure isn't lower and if I haven't lost X amount of weight, then I'll consider getting on the pills, like, to take the meds or whatever. And so that is in the midst of me also making that commitment, because around that time in August, that's when I was like, okay, what's my exit strategy to get out of corporate, to get out of this world? And so that was kind of like the transformational moment, really at the end of August, top of September, where I was like, I'm going to do all of these things. I'm going to get myself healthy physically and also mentally. That's when I started meditating, really intentionally meditating, not just one-offs, like here and there. And then getting my workout regimen, just turning it up and running and just doing things that were different for the body to shock it. And so I came back, I had lost, an exponential amount of weight in that amount of time. And then I had also lowered my blood pressure. And then I ended up getting surgery to remove the fibroids that they thought there was only like 3 fibroids in me. And when the doctor went in, there were 15 that she took out. And so I think that, that shakes you up and you're just like, all right, cool. And then also thinking about as a woman that I always, and I don't know if we talk about this, we'll talk about this today, but I am just whenever I talk to women who are doing amazing things, like one of the women that I used to look up to was Andrea Nelson Meggs. She's Beyonce's agent, married to John Meggs, who is actually my production company's entertainment lawyer. He's our lawyer. But I think that when I talked to her back in the day and I was like, how do you do it? Like, you're a top performing agent, you're a wife, you're a mother. How do you balance it? And she said, I'm not a wife. She's like, I don't look at my husband as she's like, I have a partner. And I think that really changed my mentality when I think about what partnership look like, what having a mate looks like, is looking for a partner. And so when I'm talking to my doctor and they're like, hey, if you want to have, and we took these fibroids out, if you want to have a family, you need to start thinking about that now, because they're going to come back. And, I don't know if we can operate on you again and not, have to give you a hysterectomy. Right. So things like that. And so you're thinking, I'm like, wait, I'm out here getting healthy. You out here trying to make me find a man. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're trying to, I'm like, cause I want kids, right? I want to do things a certain way, but I also want to do my career. I also want to just continue my trajectory. And so I think that a lot of things, that's like all personal things. Those are all personal health things. Those are all things that are being pressed down on you. And it's a lot of self-introspection that you have to be like, all right, cool. So what do I need to do now? Right. I can continue to keep myself healthy enough where, I can work my best to ensure that I'm not growing any more fibroids, right? To at least ensure it that way. I can make myself emotionally available to consider having a partner. But again, in that mentality, we're in a pandemic, you know what I mean? So how does that work? But then also thinking about my career. So I think to answer your question, it was like, I went through things in 2020 for sure. Like, I mean, I had to relearn how to, when you get the fibroid surgery where they cut you, like, you got to relearn how to walk. Okay. Like, you got to figure out how you can get up and move. And so, but those are the things and those are the stories. And I talk about, like, July, I think, is National Fibroid Month. And I remember I posted that, my first fibroid surgery, I want to say they removed 8 fibroids, or they removed a considerable amount of fibroids. And one of them was 12 centimeters. And one of my former colleagues was looking at my story and she was like, oh my God, you just inspired me to go to the doctor. And when I went to the doctor told me that I have a fibroid that's like 8 centimeters. And she's like, I'm going to figure out if I want to decrease it or I want to get it removed. And she was like, thank you for sharing your story. And so I'm never going to be the person that's embarrassed to talk about, I had some down moments last year. I had, concerns with my health or my weight or my reproductive system, because I think that those stories inspire and encourage and keep it real. But that also doesn't mean that I wasn't successful in business. It also doesn't mean that I didn't have amazing times. I traveled during the pandemic that a lot of people didn't travel, because again, I kept that commitment, because I told you I got to travel 4 times a year. So, you know what I mean? But like, I knew what I needed to be my best self. And so even as we constantly search for the best versions of ourselves, the world still hits you, and there's still things that are unexpected. And that is, I think if anything, the pandemic showed us that things are unexpected, right? So, but yeah, I got through it though, and I'm still progressing and still maneuvering. But yeah, definitely was a balancing act of just sorting through a lot of different things.
Yeah, and I think we need to have more honest conversations as Black women about health, about fertility, about maternal health, what our outlook is, and get serious about what we want, right?
Yeah.
Because I think oftentimes we are very bull by the horns in our careers. And yeah. I know I am. And I personally, with regard to romantic relationships, it's kind of been like, listen, like, I'm just let the chips fall where they may, right? Like, we're going to see what happened. But getting older and having a doctor look at you and say, if you want to have kids, like, you really need to start thinking about this, and soon.
Yeah.
That put to your earlier point, it requires a lot of introspection, and it puts things in a completely different perspective. Yeah. And for me, how that manifested was, I had to be honest with myself, right? I was calling it like the art of surrender. Like, if marriage happens, great. If it doesn't, I have all this other joy, right, in my life, and all the other things that I'm proud of. But I had to get honest with myself about, are you hiding behind that narrative because this feels like the one area of your life that you can't control?
And that is a word. That is a word right there, because I think that I treat relationships different, because, so real moment, right? As you say this, right? So I've never been an individual that did dating apps. Like, I never had done them. And so in the pandemic, and it's actually interesting because we just had a business meeting yesterday about just apps and things like that. And it reminded me of the things that I did in 2020, because, you're bored. You're inside the house. Like that song, in the house board. I was like, yo, that was my life. Like, I love that. And so, but what I did last year is I was like, you know what? I'm not into this dating app thing, because I believe that I'm going to meet my partner. My sister, I think my sister's very clairvoyant, and she had said to me back in 2000, I forget when she had said it, but she was like, you've already met your husband. And she was like, it's just, you guys are just gonna have to reconnect. And I was like, okay. So I've always just thought about that in my mind, of being like, oh, I've already met him. So anything that I do now is just me just buying time, basically, right? So I was like, you know what, let me do these dating apps. And when I say that I did an experiment where I joined, I'm talking about every app. I'm talking from Plenty of Fish to Tinder to some fetish app to Bumble to, I'm talking about every app, girl. And I did like a 3 week like on each app, and just like showcase like kind of like what you're experiencing. And then you see the same people across different apps. And I did the paid membership, because I was like, I want to get the full experience, right? And then I told myself, and I think I joined in May, and I said I did it from like May to August, right? And so and I remember, or maybe it was like May to September. And I think I maybe did like 2 to 3 weeks on each app, basically. And I was just like, yeah, this isn't my life. This isn't my story, because the individuals on these apps would never be able to speak to me in real life. Like, they're not the individuals that are going to come up to you and give you access, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just like, okay, cool. But I think the humbling moment there was like, I'm in a new city. I'm not in New York, where that's like my stomping grounds. I'm in LA. I don't know anyone. I've been inside the entire time I've been here, right? And so I'm like, how am I going to meet anybody? How am I going to have fun? What am I going to do? Like, what are we going to do? And so acts of such surrender of like, if it happens, it happens, is also acts of desperation, because you're like, yes, what is happening here? But I think for me, the humility involved in that experience, as well as me reaffirming who you are. Like, I think that was a term for me. Like I said to you, like, starve fear, feed, we need to starve fear, and we need to feed faith. I think for me, one of the things I had to tell myself over and over again in 2020 is remember who you are. Like, just remember who you are, because the world last year made us feel like, I feel like a lot of us lost ourselves. Like, we were inside. I mean, I think about so many people in my 6-degree separation that committed suicide last year. Like, there are so many crazy things that happened last year that I'm just like, remember who you are, though. Remember who you are. And so for me, I was constantly reminded by different actions and different experiences and occurrences that I was like, remember who you are. And so when it comes to finding a partner, or a partner and me interacting or aligning and engaging with one another, that is that one thing, to your point, because I understand what you mean. We control everything else. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I control what my hair looks like. I control what I do here. I control this. You cannot control falling in love, because first of all, love is already irrational. It don't make no sense. And so I think that once I remember that I literally have to let go and literally let God, but also remembering who I am, because I'm not going to be desperate because I want a partner, then I think that is where, I've been the most successful and the most fruitful in my dating experiences, because of the, just getting the intangibles in a relationship, being like, oh, that works for me in a partner. I don't want to do that. That works for me. I don't want to do that. And listen, again, if I'm supposed to have children, I will have them. Like, you know what I mean? The female body is an incredible thing. My mother had my brother when she was 40 years old. So I know that, things will happen in the way they're supposed to happen. And then also, if I can't physically birth a child, I love what Gabrielle Union did. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me work as hard enough where I can afford a surrogate. You know what I'm saying? So things that I think about, and let me know that there are new ways to be able to still breathe life into this world and also be happy. Like, I am not going to force myself into falling in love so I can have a child, just so I can have a child because the doctor said so. Right. So I am going to do things the way that I know that's best for me, and work in that path. And so if I can control anything, I can control that I am not going to be on someone else's timeline.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you brought up the dating app thing, because another conversation that has lit up many of my text conversations is women who feel like dating apps are not the landscape for them, but because we were stuck at home being like, well, I have to get on, because what other option do I have?
Right.
And, I'm not a fan of dating apps. I've been on at various stages of my life. And I went through a timeline where I had like a drop dead date where I was like, I'm getting off these apps no matter what. I think it was maybe like 2018 or something, 2017, 2018. I was like, I'm on these paid memberships. I had them aligned so that they all expired on the same day. I was like, when that expiration date hits, whether I've met a suitable candidate or not, I'm done. Like, I'm off this. And so that
candidate, come on.
So I was like, and I wasn't like pushing it or, campaigning with anybody. I was just like, if it happens this time frame, because it's also time consuming, like communicating with these people. So I remember like going through that and, met some cool people who I transitioned, off the internet with. And when that date came, I remember canceling everyone, and with each one that I canceled, it was like the more liberated I felt, right? Okay. I was like, oh, like this, like I'm just done. But the revelation for me was, this is not for you. Like, you're doing it because this is what people say you should do because you're busy and and this was not during the pandemic and whatever. You got to meet people. How are you supposed to meet people if you're working all the time? If you're all, And so at the time, I was off that and stayed off that until last year. Same conversation. People are like, well, what are you going to do? My therapist was like, what's your plan to meet people, right? What are you going to do? You stuck. So I was like, all right, let me get back on. It's not going to be, I can't do a bunch. Let me just do one.
Yeah.
And interestingly, so when I started, it was a very different experience because it was a lot of men who would never be on a dating app who were, because they're in the same predicament. Right. So I found that the conversations were a bit heightened.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anybody I was like, really like, it was, you could tell people were also like, wow, there are a lot of people on here who would normally be on here and had really the pick of just jumping around to a bunch of different people. And I remember making this decision to be like, it's a lot going on. I think I'm done with this. It's not, again, it's not right for me, even with all these people. and other people challenging me on that.
Yeah.
Like, what? You're 39, right? So at the time I was 38 still, but
Yeah.
you're 38. You have no time to
Right.
waste, right?
Right.
Why would you decide that you're not doing this when we don't know how long we're going to be in the house? And
Right.
the reason I made the decision was because it wasn't feeding my spirit. Similarly, in my gut, I don't think that that's how I'm going to meet the love of my life. And further, I don't make decisions out of fear. So if that's the energy you're bringing to it,
yeah,
are you really going to get out of it something healthy anyway?
Right. And that's why I was talking about, like, that's the act of desperation though, right? Like, you talk about like, oh, like you're talking about surrender. When you said that, I was like, absolutely, let go of the control around this is the one area I can't do. But also, I'm not going to have desperation control me as well. And so when you said that, absolutely, I am completely aligned. It's like, nah, that's not it. And honestly, one of the things I always say is like, what's for me is for me. Like, you can't take that from me. And so whether it's delayed, it doesn't mean that it's denied. Like, it's not denial. Like, I'm just like, all right, cool. What is for me will meet me where I'm supposed to be. And so absolutely. But I think that bravo to you for not succumbing to the projections of fear that people were putting onto you. And you reminding yourself that you know who you are and what works for you. You got off of it for a reason in 2018, and you got off for another reason in 2020, because you already knew. Like, if anything, 2020 just reaffirmed to you what you already knew to be the truth. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And what I realized, and you may feel this as well, is I don't consider myself like someone who has a public profile, right? Of course, like, I get up every day, I do my job, I grind out, we have this show. But what I realized last year is there is a lot of information about me on the internet, right? By virtue of being a podcast host, by virtue of being someone who speaks, who does all these things. So people were like listening to the show, like multiple episodes. So coming in with an understanding of what they think my personality is, who I am, just having all these pieces of information that I don't have, right? So what it had showed me in that way, there's some intrigue from a lot of people, but also some people were making snap judgments like, you are another league, and no, like, this is not for me. We're not on the same level. Like, you got too much going on. Have you experienced that?
You know what's crazy? My mother, there was a gentleman that I remember being interested in, who had kind of like resurfaced last year. And I remember we were chatting and recommunicating or whatever. And there was a moment where I was like, there was a moment where he said to me, he was like, he's like, you're too good for me. Like, I'm not good enough for you. And I said, say less. Because literally, like, my mother had said to me, she said, once a man tells you who he is, believe him.
That's it.
You know what I mean? Like, if you say that I'm not good enough for you, I'm not good enough. I mean, if you say that you're not good enough for me, then you're not good enough for me. And we just keep it stepping. And also, even to add on to that, which I think is a delicate balance, my brother, who, he is 13 years younger than me, but you tell that man anything, he is the protector for both me and my sister. He is of the mindset, he's like, well, no man is ever going to be good enough for you, but you want the man that every day he wakes up striving to be good enough. Like, how can I work hard enough to be the man that this woman needs? But a man that just says out the gate, nah, I'm not even going to try, I'm not even there. Like, that's not what you want. So listen, if a man is looking at you and he's sitting here doing his thorough research, trying to convince himself that he can do it, but recognizes deep down in his soul that he's not good enough, God bless, my guy. God bless.
Yes. And let me put this PSA out there, because I'm sure people try to hook you up, right? And I have like several wannabe matchmakers in my life.
Right.
And they will tell me these stories of like, oh, I have this guy I want you to meet. He's X, Y, and Z. I'm like, cool, sounds all right. That's fine. I'm open to that. I'm open to being hooked up. But then they'll come back and say, I gave him your stats, and he was like, nah, like, we're not at the same level. Like, this isn't going to work. And then that wannabe matchmaker is now campaigning on my behalf.
And it's like, don't do that.
And that's my PSA. If you are trying to hook up a woman that you think is great, right, and will be a great asset to somebody else and vice versa, and that candidate says, Nah, based on what you're telling me, no,
Right.
thank you. Don't do any campaigning. Like,
No,
please
exactly.
do not. Like that, it's okay. You don't have to sell a woman, you have to sell a man on a woman and vice versa. If
You don't
somebody's
want
not feeling
to.
it, that's not the right way to go. Like, just
Let it
thanks
go.
for trying, but let it go.
Thank you, but no thank you. I
Yeah.
also always say this too, that I want volunteers, not recruits. I don't want to have to recruit somebody to want to be here. So we need volunteers. That's what it is. Like, and the person that wants to be with you is going to willingly, it's like, what is the thing that the girl said? I volunteer myself as tribute. Like, that's what you want. Like, volunteer yourself as tribute. Okay. That's where we are. We don't want recruits. Okay. So yeah, I think it's always very interesting. But when in an open world, I'm meeting incredible individuals just based off of energy. You know what I'm saying? I'm not in a space where like I'm not engaging with incredible people. It's just me. I'm also self-aware enough to know that at this age, like I could tell, after one or two conversations, this ain't gonna work. You know what I'm saying? And we keep it stepping. And then I also, because I don't know if you've read the Celestine Prophecy, but if you haven't, I definitely implore you to, or anyone that's listening or watching. But I truly believe that we misinterpret energies, right? So there might be a gravitational pull that I have with said individual, and that might be misinterpreted as sexual energy, and it's not sexual energy. It might be that because we don't know all the levels of energy. Like there's so many different ways that we can read and understand what our energy is supposed to be with someone. And so because we have that energy, we're like, oh, I'm supposed to take this person to bed, or I'm supposed to engage with them romantically. And it could just be, no, you're supposed to accomplish a major task together. You're supposed to go into business together. Like you're supposed to do XYZ together, but it is not supposed to be that's supposed to be your romantic partner. And so there are so many people that go down these paths that are truly just a misinterpretation of the energy that they have with a person, and they end up not really kind of accomplishing what they were brought together to accomplish. And I've done that so many different times. Like I have so many friends, especially male friends, who'll be like, oh, they see it going a different way, and I'm like, hey, that's actually not our story, because I'm aware. Like I'm like, that's actually not our story. We're going to make this money together. We're going to accomplish this task together, and we're going to have an incredible energy doing it. Right. And so I think that for me, that's another good notation as well when it comes to thinking about being paired with people, and people being like, oh, there's something here. I'm like, you're right. There is something here. I feel it too. It's not that thing, but it is something. And I'm really intrigued to figure out what it is as we continue to build an organic relationship that might be platonic for all intents and purposes.
And not for nothing, I'm a firm believer in that people come into your life and we are meant to create together or move the needle forward on this one thing. But I also sometimes people mistake trauma bonding for a divine connection.
Ooh.
And we don't talk about that enough, right? Because
I was just reading about trauma bonding the other day. I don't know where I was reading it, but that is an unpacking. Have you talked about that already on like the show?
Not on the show. On the show.
Like that is a thing. Like people literally will link up because they have these shared experiences and they feed into them rather than conquering them. It's like, and they do it with shared experiences with individual. And they're like, oh, we have this shared exchange. And so we're going to feed into your trauma. You're going to feed into mine, and just kind of re-enlivening it. And it's like, nah, we want to strip it, shed it, and not ever breathe life into those traumas, because they start to gain control. And that just makes for a toxic relationship.
Yes. And I've had these conversations with so many people where like, we stayed up all night, he lost his parents young, I had this experience, and they're sharing all of these things that make them who they are. And not that that's always a red flag.
Right.
But it is true that sometimes you're bringing in all this baggage that's not being unpacked, but it's really giving you license to act a certain way because you understand, you each understand each other's experience. And then before you know it, toxicity has infiltrated. And you're like, I actually can't stand this person. Right. Because you just misinterpreted what that connection was and what the draw was from the beginning. So I'm working on a whole series around this, and particularly around Black love, which is we're going to talk about in a few weeks. But yes, this is a topic that is of utmost importance to me, and I think I've done a lot of internal work, continue to do that. And it's important to understand who you are, And also, I'll end this topic on this note, because I could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But also understanding the expectations you have of other people. And while I have done a lot of internal work, and I expect my partner to have done the work and continue to do it, what I have learned is to extend myself grace as well. And because if I'm not extending grace to myself, there's no way I can extend that to a man.
Delisha, I think that one of the things you said two things that are really fire to me, right? So one, that you're doing the work, right? And so I think that if 2020, I said this to a few of my friends, I said, therapists are going to have to figure out a way to coin the PTSD of 2020, right?
Yes.
Thinking about what that is in that experience. And I think that for me, when I was doing therapy, I was really a strong component of figuring out what my toolkit was. What am I activating? What do I need to what are the things that I do, the measures that I take in order to kind of make sure that I am where I need to be? So if I don't have the consistency of, because, finding a therapist is like finding a partner. It really is. It really is. And I say this to people all the time. I'm like, and you got to find a partner. So like when I lost my therapist, it's like, okay, I'm not really in a place where I want to continue to date again. Right. So let me take the tools that I have and do the things that I know that I need to do. So whether it's journaling, whether it's talking to my 87-year-old phenomenal uncle who calls me every Tuesday as my unofficial therapist to unpack my world for me, or it's cooking, figuring out what my toolkit is to be able, because I know that I have things that are important to me to unpack daily, because there are things that I know, I'm aware of what my traumas are. I know what my triggers are. I got 8 or 9 triggers and I know what they are. And I literally, I reflect on them, not because I give control into them, but I want to make sure that if I want to have a rage reaction to something, is it a direct connection to a trigger that's been activated, right? And so having all that for what you said about the work, and then you talk about you want a partner that has also done the work. For me, I made the promise to myself in 2019 that I was no longer, or excuse me, at the top of 2020, that I would no longer date a man who was not in therapy. Or had done therapy. He's either had to have done therapy or be in therapy, because I think it's unfair and just not okay that I've sat here and done all this work on myself and you still have things that you haven't worked on and you have traumas, especially because I want a Black man, and Black men are naturally entrenched to trauma. Like, it's just not, it's impossible. Like, they go through so much, just like we go through so much, but they go through so much, like whether it's toxic masculinity, whether it's just dealing with different imbalances and inequities that they deal with at work. It's like, and I want to be still your therapist as your partner because we have that balance and that connection. But I also want a licensed individual to also walk you through and help you understand. So when I say to a man, do you know what your triggers are? He knows what I'm saying. Like, he knows he knows how to answer me. And so, because you're not going to set me up for success to be your partner if you can't tell me what your triggers are, because I'm going to keep, it's a landfill. I'm going to keep stepping on these mines, not knowing that was your trigger. So I think that I'm excited about your Black Love series and the conversations. I think that's important. I think that bravo to you. And I think that, as you said, don't sell yourself short in thinking that wanting a man that has done the work or it's in the work presently is too much to ask, because there are a lot of individuals who I know, especially Black men, who are in therapy, whether recently or have been in it. And I think that it should be a mandatory. Like, we as Black individuals go through so much trauma. So even if you just do it for a bit and you figure out what it is, and that's not you or whatever it is, make the commitment to have a conversation. So I just wanted to call that out, because I think that we need to celebrate individuals who have either done the work or are doing the work.
For sure. And I'm optimistic. I think all of us creating these platforms, the work that you're doing, the millions of shows online, our podcast, so we're really talking about our own humanity and fragility and vulnerability and all those things. I do think the stigma in a lot of ways is lifting. It's going to take time. So I feel good about where we're headed as a community.
Yeah.
And do I feel like, there's some delayed gratification on the, the relationship front? Yes, absolutely. I'm a human being. But I think the wait is going to be worth it. And I'm firm believer that the latter is going to be greater, and for having done the work and for waiting for someone who's done and is doing as well. But the one question we've been asking everyone is, now you've been moving and shaking during the quarantine. But when outside is fully open, the restrictions are lifted, we've reached herd immunity, we can really move in a way that we did prior to all of this. What's the first thing you're doing?
Well, I've already been doing it. You know what I mean? Like I went to
That's why I prefaced it with you've been doing stuff.
I went to Jamaica in October for my sister's birthday. I went to Cabo in December, Tulum in February. I went to Puerto Vallarta in March. Like I've been outside, girl. But but I think things that I'm looking forward to for this year, right? I have some of my line sisters are getting married. I have a few weddings, so excited about going to the weddings that were postponed from last year. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to taking my mom. It's my mom's 60th birthday this year. So I want to take her to Australia and New Zealand. And then I want to go to Lagos and Zanzibar in December. So those are things that I am looking forward to for this year as it relates to kind of just like traveling outside. Just last night, I had the opportunity to celebrate with some of my close friends here in Los Angeles. And, I was like, listen, we outside, everybody get dressed. Everybody get fly. I want everybody to know that all my girls is bad, like all of that. Like, so I wanted the injection of reminder that, you are bad. Like you are amazing. You are fully well prepared in connection. Y'all been in the gym, y'all been working, let these people see what we're doing. And so to be able to do that last night with them was incredible. And that was something that has truly been a highlight for me so far with the slow progression of openness that we're walking into.
And that connection with your village, I took it for granted before the pandemic, just to have a night out, just to talk and, shoot the breeze and vents and be fly and all of that for sure. So kudos to you, because I have not been on vacation. I can't remember. Like that's how long it's been, like a real luxurious vacation. Cause I made the mistake of sacrificing that, not because I didn't have the resources pre-pandemic. I was just so busy. I was like, I don't have time. I'm focused on other things.
Right.
And so coming into 2020 burnt out, and then being like, I realized, to your point, that and it's a revelation I had during the last year. I need that. It's not a luxury. It's a necessity for me to show up as my best self. I have to go to exotic places.
Yeah.
Sun, sand,
all of it.
Absolutely.
All of it. I was like, figure out your things, like figure out your toolkit that helps you be your healthiest version. Like that is therapeutic for me, to be outside near the ocean in a place like, I have all these goals to continue. We talked about it before. Like I want to travel to a different country, to 4 different countries a year. And like, thinking through that piece. And I'm like, all right, cool. So not only accomplishing a goal, but also being able to feed and breathe life into myself, So I'm looking forward for you to turn up and go out here and get in the sun. Because we missed you, girl. Because I've been out there and they told me they missed you.
Listen, it's got to happen. I'm looking at flights now, looking at some, nice fly places to go. It is definitely time. I'm a whole different foundation cover. That's how color. That's how long I've been inside. My foundation doesn't even match anymore. I'm like, when did this become too dark?
Like, it's a problem.
So I know you're off LinkedIn, obviously, but where can people find you online?
Yeah. So, I'm on the Malcolm Inc. website that we launched when we did our announcements a couple of weeks ago. I have social media, I have Instagram, but really, you can email me if you want to talk to me or have any questions. It's just india@listenupmedia.co. Where, if you guys want to talk about anything that pertains to Malcolm, or if you want to talk about production pieces that they have a story to tell, they can reach out and we can see if we can make something happen.
Listen, creators, you got a direct line.
Right.
And we on this show, we are committed to growing together. Right? Yes. We always, people have this thing where they're trying to chase the biggest name or the people they think could make something happen the quickest and give them the most exposure. I look forward to, as we grow and progress as a 26er community, being able to say, oh, I knew her before she even started that. Like, we go way back. So I encourage people, creators, those, even if you just want information, have a conversation, reach out to India. There's no doubt that there's going to come a time where it's going to be harder to get you on in these conversations. So do what you need to do, stay connected, support the work, folks. When it comes out, support what she's doing. You know what else to do. If you enjoyed this episode, like, share, subscribe, tell somebody about it. And as always, remember to be extraordinary on an ordinary day. Take care.
Yes.